Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alpana Sharma, and I am a business advisor at Women's Enterprise Center, working out of our Vancouver office. Thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the agenda. I'll provide an update on the services we provide, introduce our panelists, and get started into the discussion on the questions you may have if you are exploring exporting or checking out a new export market for your successful international business. So, Women's Enterprise Center is a nonprofit organization devoted to helping BC women start, lead, and grow their business. With offices in Kelowna, Vancouver, and Victoria, our team understands and relates to the unique circumstances of women business owners. Our full range of services includes business loans up to $150,000, business advice, skills training, mentoring, resources, and a supportive community to help women entrepreneurs realize their business potential. Our experienced business advisors, mentors, trainers, and facilitators provide our clients with tools and confidence through a supportive, individual, and practical approach. So, to stay informed of what is happening in your area and to learn more about our services, go to our website, which is womensenterprise.ca, and sign up for our newsletter. That's a great way of staying updated with what's happening in the community and important business events and workshops and webinars. So to answer your questions this morning, we have three amazing panelists. We have Carrie Ewers, President and CEO of Crichton. Carrie is a recognized leader, mentor, and sought after speaker on corporate growth strategies, innovation management, corporate culture, and export development. She is currently on the board of directors for Export Development Canada, where she works to support Canadian businesses and elevate them to a global level. She is also a board director and senior vice chair with the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. So thank you for being here, Carrie. We have Emily McKenzie. She is a trade commissioner based in Vancouver, where she covers advanced manufacturing, robotics, and agtech sectors. She joined the federal government in 2007, working for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in the BC Regional Office, where she worked in the areas of trade promotion and industry development. And we also have Chelsea Luciani. She is a senior manager in the Trade Policy and Negotiations branch in the BC Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology. Chelsea has covered several international free trade agreements and negotiations, such as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, better known as CPTPP, the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, and the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. So there's a lot of expertise that our panelists bring today to the session. Before we dive into your questions, I will ask our panelists to give a quick overview of what they do in case I miss something. So let's start with you, Carrie. Carrie, can you hear me?
Oh, there you go. I just had you on mute.
Yeah, in case I missed something, Carrie, can you just give us a quick overview of what you do?
You bet. Crichton International is a manufacturer of waterproofing and durability solutions for concrete. So we invented an additive that goes into concrete to make it waterproof. And then we supply that through distribution around the world and export our products to over 50 countries currently, supporting our worldwide distributors with our own full-time people to help developers and owners build sustainable concrete construction in buildings and infrastructure.
That's great. Thank you, Carrie. And Chelsea? Chelsea, can you give us a quick overview of what you do? And if you can unmute yourself. So I think we have a little bit of technical issue here with the mute button. Chelsea, can you hear me? Emily? Chelsea, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. I could hear you the whole time, but I'm not sure if you guys could hear me.
Okay, a little bit of technical issue, but we are fine now. So in case we missed something, do you want to add, give a quick overview of what you do?
Sure. So I work in the Trade Policy and Negotiations branch in the BC government. We seek to represent BC's interests in free trade agreement negotiations, and we also work to raise awareness of the opportunities in free trade agreements in order to help BC businesses make the most of these opportunities.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Emily?
Yes, hi. So I work here in Vancouver in the Trade Commissioner Service. I'm a Trade Commissioner covering agriculture technologies, advanced manufacturing, robotics. The Trade Commissioner Service has offices worldwide in over 160 cities. We're there to help Canadian businesses, like everyone on the phone today, succeed in international markets.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that quick overview. So as a small business owner, you might think that exporting is only for big businesses. But here's the thing, you don't need a fleet of shipping containers to do exporting. Even if you provide services, you can become an exporter. So why export? That's one of the questions that we get asked. So why export? Well, if you are selling to the domestic market, you are limiting your growth potential. New markets mean more sales. With a larger market base, your profits can grow quickly. Also, the global marketplace is very competitive. Competition means innovation. To survive and succeed, you need to improve business processes and innovate. And so, by becoming competitive, you not only succeed in the overseas market, but also increase the value of your business in the domestic market. So it's a win-win situation. Not a lot of times people think that exporting is difficult. It's not tough if you have prepared well in terms of research, costs, and time. So get advice from professionals. Take advantage of the numerous support programs and services. And today we have 3 amazing panelists who have volunteered to share their knowledge and experience. And if you want any clarification on any of their answers, please feel free to ask it. So let's get started and dive into the questions. So how can a small business owner become export ready? What are the 3 things that they need to do to consider to be export ready? So let's start with you, Carrie.
Okay. I think one of the first things that came to mind when when you asked that question is a little bit of passion. I think that, you know, one thing about exporting is you have to, it's something that is a fantastic opportunity. And I think having some passion around it is definitely one of the things that I encourage. But knowledge and research. So knowledge about the areas you want to export, to get research and that's all to help in formulating the plan that you spoke of, Alpana. You definitely have to have a plan. You know, it doesn't mean you have to, especially as a small business, you go back into the 70s, my father, when he started exporting in the mid-70s, he had a plan and he had the passion, but his plan probably wasn't even at that point all that written down so much as he sees opportunity and got plane tickets and went to go places and meet people and use the Trade Commissioner's Service as his first stop out of the airport to help him introduce to potential clients and people and to get that research on the ground while I was there. But it was a little more fly by the seat of the pants, and he still had some success. These days we are, you know, a little more sophisticated. We do a lot more research. We use the Trade Commissioner's Service pretty extensively, and we get plans based on all sorts of data metrics and so forth. But whether you start just kind of, you know, simple or you go a little more complex, I think in either case, you know, having some type of plan to get going is very valuable.
That's great. Yeah, you're right. Planning well is key, right? Emily, what are some of the things that you would advise a small business owner to become export ready?
Well, I echo Carrie's sentiments there about planning. It's probably one of the most important things to do is develop an export plan, know where you want to go, why are you targeting that market, what's your competitive advantage, who are your competitors, what's your pricing strategy going to be, looking at the logistics, how are you going to get your products there, or can you get offer your services in that market. So that's really important, and building your connections and your networks are very important in your market that you're targeting, and having a look at your capacity. Again, whether you're going to go big or just small, starting with a neighboring market, perhaps. Looking at your resources, do you have the HR resources in place? Do you have financing to be able to target and build and support a new market?
Yeah, some great points there. Chelsea, what would you advise a small business owner to be export ready?
Thank you. Well, first I'll echo a lot of what was already said. One other thing I might add is that there are some exporting online tools and quizzes online you can take, and I'll share a link later on. So just to add on to what everyone said, you can also do some quizzes, and it'll kind of help you see where you are and if you're ready.
Some great suggestions. Thank you for these points that you all mentioned. And as you all pointed out, preparing well is the key to success. Find out about your market. Yeah. So thank you for those suggestions. And we know that there are quite a few resources that can help women in international trade, and we will be discussing that in detail. Also, so the Trade Commissioner Service is a great support for women exporters. So Emily, as a Trade Commissioner, can you tell us briefly about the support that your organization can provide?
Certainly. So we can certainly provide market advice, help you prepare and review and discuss your strategy with you for your targeted market. Us and all our offices internationally can help with troubleshooting. If you have a border challenge, we can't necessarily make the problem go away, but we can help you to understand what's going on and what the potential avenues might be to resolve the issue. We also organize a number of trade missions. So those are things that can help you build your networks, understanding the markets that you're targeting. We suggest start with the regional offices. We've got offices across Canada. So start here and let's discuss your plan and give you some advice, and then we can narrow down there where we might be able to help you and introduce you to our Trade Commissioner network abroad.
Yeah, it's a great support program. Carrie, you have worked with the trade commissioners. Can you tell us about your experience?
Yes, well, it's been over a 40-year period. So like I mentioned, my father would just get a one-way ticket to a country and stop at the Trade Commissioner Service, and they would help him make connections back in the early days. But these days, the Trade Commissioner Service has helped us develop our distribution network. And in Hong Kong, for example, we were looking for a new distributor. So we worked with the Trade Commissioner Service offices here, and then they helped us connect with the office in Hong Kong, who then with a profile of the type of people, customers we're trying to locate, they were able to make introductions, create a list so that we could have our team fly in and meet with the different people introduced by the local trade commissioner service there. And that helped us procure a new distributor there. In a different way, we went to the UK and we were developing the market after already having distribution. So our distributor in the UK worked with ourselves, the Trade Commissioner Service, and at Canada House, they were able to provide us the venue to hold seminars and to be able to represent the Canadian technology and innovations to a whole range of architects and engineers to help develop the market for our distribution there. So that was super helpful and helped really propel some of the success that our distribution network was able to get going.
That's great. It's good to know how it has helped. So our other entrepreneurs, our participants today can learn more about the service and how it can help them. Chelsea, would you like to add to it?
Sure. I was just going to say that the BC government also has offices in many parts of the world, and they work very closely with the Trade Commissioner Service and with the federal government. So there are additional resources out there as well.
That's great. That's good to know. And like all these resources come together to help entrepreneurs. So that's great to know that the Trade Commissioner Service can support greatly women exporters. So let's talk about trade agreements. So trade agreements help remove barriers to international trade. A lot of times, potential exporters, new exporters, are not aware of how this can help them. So how can BC women exporters leverage such free trade agreements? Chelsea, since you work in that field, can you help our participants understand how trade agreements can help them?
Sure. So as Alpana said, trade agreements are tools to facilitate trade and to reduce barriers between markets. So they cover things like goods, services, investment, government procurement, and other things. And a very significant benefit of free trade agreements is the reduction and often elimination of the majority of tariffs leveled between the two countries. So tariffs are duties. They're essentially taxes at the border. So for example, before the agreement with the EU came into effect, mackerel from Canada entering the EU was subject to about 20% tariff. So that made, Canadian mackerel less competitive in the EU market. And once the agreement came to effect, that tariff became 0%. So this is just an example of how, when you have an agreement, your products and your services just become a lot more competitive than, say, other competitors who don't have the same trade agreement or same access that, your country does. Mm-hmm. Another benefit is elimination and reduction of non-tariff barriers. So these are things like requiring duplicate testing or duplicate certification, which can raise costs for businesses and make your product less competitive. Mm-hmm. Another opportunity is that trade agreements, they provide certainty, transparency, and predictability because the rules are written down. They're in the agreement. There are rules on how your goods and your services, how your investment should be treated in the other market. There are rules on non-discrimination. So it just provides that additional level of certainty, and you know how things will work when you get there. And of course, if there's any issues, if you're not being treated fairly, the agreements also have a dispute settlement to enforce the agreement and to make sure the other countries are living up to their commitments. Mm-hmm. And then just two other quick things I'll mention is that depending on the trade agreement, they also have this thing called temporary entry, which is essentially sort of facilitated business travel. So depending on the agreement, it might allow certain categories of business people and professionals to enter the market to service and investment, for example. And there's also government procurement opportunities. So as you know, governments buy goods and services. So when a trade agreement includes government procurement, this allows a company from the other market to bid on a government contract in that market. So for example, the EU government procurement market, this is worth approximately 3.3 trillion a year. So under the agreement we have with the EU, BC companies and Canadian companies are able to go to the EU and bid on contracts there. One final thing I want to mention is that, if you want to find out if Canada has a free trade agreement or not with a country, you can Google Canada's trade and investment agreements. It'll come up with a website that'll allow you to search by region and by status. So it'll tell you if an agreement is in effect or if it's under negotiation. And that link will be shared as well. So that's one thing you can do as part of your market research. And then there's also a really helpful tool that the federal government created called Canada Tariff Finder. So it allows you to check the tariff rate for a product that you're trying to export to a country that Canada has a free trade agreement with. So for example, if you're trying to export, lumber or seafood or something like that, if you know the HS code or the keyword for the product, you can search to see what the rate will be in that market that Canada has an agreement with.
That's great. Thanks, Chelsea. And we will be emailing our participants some of the links that, some of the resources that you mentioned today, Chelsea. And I agree that the trade agreements bring great competitive advantage to the Canadian companies. So, Kerry, can you tell us how it has helped you, the trade agreements?
Sure. Well, we export to, I think, all but one of the CPTPP countries. So out of the 12 countries or the 11 countries we're exporting outside of Canada to, we export to 10 of them. And so the good news is you know, the newest one was Peru, where we didn't have a distributor before the agreement, but it made it easier to get a distributor when you can work out your landed costs or their landed costs and show the competitiveness of your product in country. In places where we were already exporting, like Chile, our customer there enjoyed, I believe it was a 6 or 8% tariff reduction. So that just means they have, you know, 6 or 8% more money to either as margin or as what we try to promote all of our customers to do is to put that savings into marketing so that they can better grow the market share of our products that they supply there. So trade agreements can be great for tariffs. Non-tariffs, and there's a lot of them, protectionism is kind of alive and well all over the world at times. And so with the added help of looking at certifications and duplication of paperwork and that, which can be annoying and resource draining, it's nice to go to trade agreement areas where there's a little more streamlined approach to how your product is received. And again, the Trade Commissioner's Service or the BC Ministry Trade Division can both help in identifying, you know, that in market, you know, those help you, you know, navigate those issues in market.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kerry. And I think trade agreements, as I mentioned earlier, are a great way for Canadian companies to stay competitive. Emily, would you like to add to it?
Yeah, I would just echo the comments about our Tariff Finder website. Have a look at your product, look them up in that website, the HS code, and you can see if you have an advantage vis-a-vis another competitor in another market that doesn't have a trade agreement with that country, because you might find that that's another advantage for you. And also just on the services side, Chelsea mentioned a number of the benefits and just the transparency and the predictability that free trade agreements give, particularly around services. But realize again that free trade agreements are complex. So have a look at our website, look at the sections applicable to your particular products or services, and then talk to a trade commissioner just to double check and verify what benefits might be available to you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so
can I add one more thing to Emily's comment? One of the things I think people don't realize is originally the U.S. was part of the TPP, but then when they opted out and it became the CPTPP for the other 12 countries, if you're competing with any U.S. made products, you're at a direct competitive advantage right out of the gate. And I think that's really important to note, because we have many of our competitors come out of the United States to the international markets. And by having this window of opportunity, because they'll do their own trade agreements eventually, but I think it's relevant to know that the urgency of getting into market and be first in and have that competitive pricing advantage to get a hub and they'll eventually make their own, but then you're there and established ahead of time. And I think that's a really important thing to note about trade agreements, is that there's a real opportunity right now with CETA and CPTPP for Canadian businesses to get out there and create a beachhead ahead of competition that's coming out of the United States.
Thanks for pointing that out, Carrie. I totally agree with that. Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunity for diversifying their export market now. Okay, let's talk about exporting services. Quite a few times we hear from clients, I'm a consultant, can I export my services? So how can women export services? And I know before the start of session, we're talking about services, exporting services. So if a small business owner is providing services and they want to export, how can they do it? So Emily, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I would start again. So to export services, you need to have a strong competitive advantage. You can beat out local competitors, so you can beat out local competitors. Figure out who your competitors are in the local market and what sets you apart. Identify any potential hurdles. Do clients need to be able to reach you during their business hours? Are there time zone changes? Are there local language considerations? Are there mutual recognition of professional qualifications? That's something that free trade agreements help with, but you need to also look at, are there any particular sectors that are carved out of the free trade agreements, any exemptions there? So that's important to know.
Yeah, thanks for that, Emily. And Chelsea, I know the free trade agreements talk about how it can help entrepreneurs who want to export services. So can you just tell us very briefly about if a small business owner wants to export service, how they can be helped? How do they export services?
Sure. So I would just build on Emily's point. I would check to see if there is a trade agreement with the country that you're interested in exporting your services to. Some of the trade agreements will have greater access to services than others. Some of them will have more opportunities in areas like temporary entry, which allows facilitated entry for some service providers and some professionals. Some will have greater access for government procurement. So, for example, you as a service provider may be able to bid on more contracts in one market versus another. So I would check to see what the agreements are and which ones have more access. And the advantage, I think, of these free trade agreements for services is, like, as we said earlier, they do provide more certainty, more transparency in how you're going to be treated. They have commitments that countries make on non-discrimination, where they can't treat a BC company, for example, worse than their domestic company. Some of the agreements say that they can't require you to create a local presence in that other market in order to be able to do business there. So that's another opportunity there. And another commitment that these agreements have are things like preventing the other country from restricting the number of service suppliers in that market. So there are a lot of opportunities in these agreements, and they sort of create a more level playing field. So I would really suggest looking to see if there's an agreement that you can add to your advantage.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity.
And one final point, if you've got questions, we are here to help figure some of these things out. As Emily mentioned, some of these agreements, they have exceptions and they have carve-outs. So a lot of them cover almost everything, but there are a few areas that governments sort of exclude from the agreement. So it can be hard figuring it out sometimes. So we are here to help if you have questions.
That's great. It's good to know that the support is there if someone is interested in learning more about how to export service. Kenny, would you like to add to it?
No, I think the girls have covered that quite thoroughly. Thanks.
Okay, so let's talk about one of the most important questions that a new exporter or someone who is already exporting, they usually have is, what are the support programs for me? We know that there are quite a few programs that can help women grow their international trade. The challenge is sometimes clients are not aware of such resources, and our panelists today can really help us learn about these programs and how to tap into all these programs. So, Kerry, would you like to talk about some of the resources that are available to women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. And these are resources we've availed of over the years as well, with excellent success. I have no challenge in recommending some of these sources. And certainly Emily and Chelsea will note that they're a resource for a lot of information and knowledge. But in addition to that, EDC has assistance to women entrepreneurs. And you can find that on their main page, which is www.edc.ca/women in trade, which I know Alpana will be able to list on their website as well. And this gives a link to all the various resources. But you know, when people are looking for, well, what about this country, or what countries would be best, or what cluster of area is up and coming, or what emerging markets are needing my products and services, that's really where EDC as a whole, and really a new department of emerging help for SMEs and micro businesses. So they're really building the supports for very small businesses right up to, you know, larger SMEs to get the information that they need. The other thing they noted recently was the announcement of the $50 million investment program for women entrepreneurs, and that's in the same website, Women in Trade Investment Program, which again the link will be listed. But this gives all sorts of opportunity for women to avail of funding and supports for exporting in a pretty big way, which includes, you know, the involvement of the Trade Commissioner Service, BDC, and others that will help provide funding and support. More local to home, here in the BC, the BC government was kind enough to help fund the startup of the World Trade Center's Trade Accelerator Program and related programs. And so with revitalizing the World Trade Center through the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, this new arm is using a program to help entrepreneurs get the knowledge and write the business plans to target these other areas. Our company was part of the first cohort. The next one's actually happening in Victoria, June 18th to 24th. But it's essentially a four-day program held over a 6-week period. But I think one of the best things is, besides all the knowledge and the business plan and be able to get all the information related to exporting, it's the network. So hanging around with 20 other entrepreneurs that are also wanting to export. We've had lots of synergies where in the first cohort, I believe it was Whistler Water, then joined forces with, I think it was Tiger Beer, because they realized they're going to the same customers. So being able to leverage their knowledge of regions and customers and to be able to strategize or that was a nice added benefit. It wasn't one of the planned approaches, but some of these things helped these companies be not only export ready, but really get, you know, some enthusiasm and passion towards having success. And already we're seeing the revenue and profitability for those companies coming out of that program. Most recently, the World Trade Center launched International E-Commerce Essentials, which is called, acronym is ICE. And that's to complement the Trade Accelerator Program, or TAP, giving in-depth and hands-on techniques to succeed in cross-border e-commerce. So this is another one where e-commerce and services and some other things can be availed of. So those are all, there's links that I know you'll put up on those, but those are great resources that give you the knowledge, the supports. Many of these programs are sponsors, like, for example, TAP, although the sticker price is, I think, about $2,500, there's many sponsors that will sponsor or provide that fee for the entrepreneurs. So many entrepreneurs and many people have gone through these programs have been sponsored by the sponsors of those programs, and so they've had to pay nothing to go through this 4-day program. So that we could assist any entrepreneurs, any ladies interested in this area to find the way to have that funded for them.
That's great, Carrie. Those are some great resources. I know Export Development Canada is a great support, and they have some amazing online tools also if people are looking for information. And Trade Accelerator Program, that's another great program. So thank you for talking about these, Carrie, and I'm sure our participants will go now and check out these resources that can be really, really helpful to them. Emily, how about you? What are some of the programs that you think can help women grow their international trade?
Yeah, for sure. The Trade Commissioner Service also has the Business Women in International Trade. So we have trade commissioners in all our regional offices that work with women-owned and operated businesses. We do certain initiatives like virtual trade missions. We have some global affairs-led inclusive trade missions. And one thing to note is, one of our funding programs we have to help, it's a risk-sharing market diversification program called Can Export, and it provides 50% matching funds for eligible activities for companies to go and pursue a market that is new to them. And so one thing with this program, it usually has a minimum requirement of $20,000. So the matched amount would be a $10,000 contribution. But for our inclusive trade missions, we waive the minimum project amount. So if a company wants to go on a women international business mission, you can apply for the Can Export program to offset the costs of such programs. And we've got a number of ones that are coming up, a number in the US, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council Conference in Baltimore, Go for the Green's Business Development Conference in Florida, and National Minority Supplier Development Council Conference in Atlanta. Other programs that are out there, the Export Navigator program, it recently has announced new positions created to focus on women exporters. That's a great resource for people in all communities of BC, not just in Vancouver or major kind of centers. Of course, all the EDC programs that Carrie mentioned. And BDC has funding not just for exporters, but has dedicated money for majority women-owned companies and women-led technology businesses. And of course, there's also Small Business BC, not just for women, but a fantastic resource for companies as you work to put together your plan and get ready for international markets.
Thanks, Emily. Those are some great resources. And I would definitely encourage our participants to check out Can Export program. If you are exporting or if you're planning to export, it's a great resource. So check that out. Chelsea, what programs and resources would you like to add today?
Sure. I'll just add a little bit more about the Export Navigator program. So Export Navigator helps BC businesses become export ready by providing community-based export advisors who connect businesses with programs and services that are unique to their business needs. And these specially trained advisors, they provide personalized step-by-step approaches to help businesses become export ready by helping them navigate the many services available, help them tackle the logistics of customs certifications and other export requirements. And as Emily mentioned, the program is being expanded. It's now going to offer specialized support for businesses owned by women, as well as businesses owned by Indigenous peoples and by youth. And we're hoping to have these new advisors in place in the next few months.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Thanks for pointing out these resources and programs, because a lot of time clients don't know the support programs that are available to them, and that can really play a key role in their success. So thank you for pointing out all those resources. So I want to talk a little bit about diversification in exporting. So what do you advise? Is it better to focus on one export market or more than one? Some countries are huge, so is it better to focus on the whole country or maybe just a specific geographical area? Because that is one of the challenges new exporters especially face, that how do they start it? Where do they focus? So Carrie, what advice would you give to an exporter about diversification in exporting?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what kind of products and services and where you're playing. So for example, when we looked at Asia, we looked at multiple countries, but not all countries in Asia. And once you've traveled there, once you're there, you can visit different markets to be able to support them. But the other place that, or Middle East, it would be kind of the same thing. When we looked at the Middle East, we essentially narrowed it down to primary countries we felt that we would be competitive in and that had growth potential, and then secondary countries. And so we developed the market based on, a few countries within a region to start, and then added from there. But a lot of interest is like China. And so over the years, we've been selling into China actually, from originally as early as 1980, originally through Hong Kong. And then once we were able to go into mainland China, we did that as a joint venture, and then eventually set up our own offices ourselves. But it's not necessarily having, say, even in a market like China, to have a China plan. China's too big. It's like a bunch of little countries within China. So it's better to kind of look at China and say, let's break it down to what regions or provinces within China are we going to have our best opportunity? Keeping in mind that mid-sized cities are still 10 million people per city, right? So it's kind of, do you want to go into the big, the primary cities and have greater competition, or do you want to go in maybe the secondary cities, which is still huge opportunity, huge potential? Is there a particular region you're going to be more successful in? And I think that's, again, where the supports of the Trade Commissioner Service or the ministry, the BC Ministry Trade Services can also help with regard to defining where you're going and how to approach that. But it depends on your resources and your interest in, do you travel to a bunch of regions and start people going in more than one area, and is that easier to support than maybe just being more focused on a much narrower region or market cluster?
That's great suggestion. It also, like, you have to kind of look at what exactly is your capacity, how much can you do. So thank you for that suggestion, Carrie. Emily, would you like to add to it?
For sure. Certainly agree. I mean, it's important to diversify to mitigate your risk. But really, you need to look at your own situation and what your capacity is to expand into new markets. And to scale up, and what resources do you have to dedicate to export? Exactly, like looking at the US is going to be entirely different from looking at Serbia. Two different markets. The US is huge, and you definitely need to segment that market. Selling to Florida, to Michigan, to California, they're all going to be entirely different approaches needed. So that's a big consideration. And in particular, our Can Export program, again, recognizes some of these things and has broken down a few markets into different regions like China, Brazil, and India, recognizing that it's not going to be a whole of country approach. It's going to be regional in some of these markets.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, different markets are very different. Chelsea, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Well, I think I'd just say, there isn't a single answer to whether you should focus on one export market or multiple export markets. It varies by your products, your services, your resources. And of course, doing your market research is an important element of figuring this out, like figuring out the regulatory climate in that market, the competitiveness, what the tariff rates are, distribution structure, consumers, for example. If you found a market that has good distribution relations, like with nearby markets like Singapore, that might change the calculation on whether or not you do one or multiple. But then, as Carrie noted earlier, if it's China, it's a very big country, and if your resources are limited, you may want to focus on one city or one region rather than the whole country. So the answer, it really varies.
I agree. To be successful, one needs the right market knowledge. So how do exporters get the market knowledge? How do they find it's a promising market for them? Are there some tools, online resources that you can advise them? What are some of the ways that they can find out about whether the market is right for them or not? Where would you suggest they look for that information? Emily, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I would always start with organizations like Small Business BC that have tremendous resources, access to different market research, and depending on your product, look at websites like the Trade Commissioner Service, or if it's a food product, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has a lot of market reports on different kinds of products and sectors in different markets. So I would start there. And there's also different organizations, reputable consulting companies who put out global market reports, like PricewaterhouseCoopers would have different market reports. You can either purchase those or look at summaries. There's often free summaries that are available online. And once you've done this amount, talk to the Trade Commissioner Service. We can connect you to our different offices abroad that would have further market information, and talk to different organizations, trade associations, either here or in the markets that you're targeting, chambers of commerce. They would have access to different resources and often different networking events where you can talk to non-competing businesses and what their experiences are in different markets and what resources they suggest.
That's great. Kerry, from your experience, how did you find the right markets for your business?
Well, I think it's, you do look abroad to, in my business, of course, we're in the waterproofing and construction market. So we're looking for places that are building, or where there's growth opportunity and building of cities and so forth. So I think that it's a combination of doing the research and getting, the statistics and so forth. But I have to admit, I think like most of my peers that are owners and CEOs, we tend to network with each other. So as noted, trade, organizations like the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade and now the World Trade Center, getting around other people who are exporting and asking them their experience, what they're seeing in the market, what, on the ground, and getting a feel for where there's opportunity, but also where there's, an openness to imported products. We enjoy the reputation of being a Canadian-made product, and in many jurisdictions that's held in high regard. There's lots of lesser expensive local-made products, but the trust factor on a Canadian supplied waterproofing and construction material is quite high. So you can garner a higher price in those projects. So I think that networking and getting around other people is really invaluable, and there's many associations and many opportunities to do that, and I think that's really where a lot of learning and a lot of encouragement can come as well.
Thanks for that. Chelsea, what is your advice to a client who's looking for a promising export market? Where can they find that market knowledge?
Sure. What I would suggest get in touch with, some of the resources available to you. So, Emily mentioned Trade Commissioner Service. I'd add the BC government trade and investment representatives around the world as well. So, there are offices located in 17 markets around the world, and they specialize in various sectors. So, for example, they're specializing in agri-food or ICT, and they have a lot of experience helping BC companies wanting to do business with those markets. So, they're there on the ground, and they can provide that market advice and what the lay of the land is. They can do things like introduce you to, local importers that are qualified by the representative. And these importers can help you register your products, for example. Another thing I would suggest that, if you've already identified a market that you're interested in, get in touch with the Export Navigator program, because they can help you develop a thorough plan by working through with an experienced exporter and just kind of test that plan out for you.
Yeah. Export Navigator is a great program if someone is looking for market information. So thank you for those suggestions. One of the questions that we get asked that someone wants to export, but they're not sure how to enter the new market. They're not sure about their entry strategy. So how do they do it? Face-to-face or agents, distributors? Is there a preferred method of doing business internationally if someone is just starting out? What would you advise, Kerry, from your experience?
Yeah, and I think it starts with even just talking to the Trade Commissioner's Service. But one of the things that I would advise people to do is don't just e-blast everybody in every office. And that actually happened with us one time where our business development person wasn't getting any response. And so it was the local office that said, oh, well, wait, what you need to do is you need my help to introduce you probably to the right people abroad with the right expertise. And so that was a good start. But once we got in market and we're looking, we've had agents. Like, agents are the lesser expensive way of getting a market going, but they don't work for you. They carry multiple lines, so there's pros and cons to that. You may only get a little bit of the share of their time. Agents are typically better once you've established a market to help support it, as opposed to create it from scratch. Whereas your own people in market can be more expensive, but you'll have that focus and full-time effort. But definitely face-to-face. There's no getting around the fact that people want to build relationships and see who you are. So although we actually pioneered the emailing and developing business and distribution opportunities really just over the internet, 20 years ago, I think that you still need to factor in the fact that you need to get on a plane and go see them, or get them to come here so that you can build that relationship, and then determine is a distribution opportunity or working through distributors or agents or supported by your own full-time people the right mix of supports to launch and build a market abroad.
That's great. Yeah, again, they have to look at their own business and see where exactly their focus is and what exactly is their capacity. Thank you so much for those suggestions, Kerry. Emily, would you like to mention, what do you think should be a preferred method of doing business internationally?
For sure. I mean, certainly this is going to be a major consideration in looking, do I try and do some sales directly myself, or do I engage with a local partner? And it's really going to depend. Obviously, doing it yourself, no one knows the business better than you or your products. No one's as passionate or as motivated to sell your products. But the cons to that is that you may not know the local language. You may not have the connections. You may miss sort of cues that someone from that market would pick up. There may be time differences. Not being able to be everywhere at once. So there's a lot of factors to take into consideration. But with working with a partner, with a distributor or such, it really is a lot about finding the right partner that's the right fit for you. As Kerry mentioned, understanding how the distributor works. Are they just sort of reactively carrying your product? Do they have salespeople that proactively go out there and try and drum up business for their products? Or maybe you also need to engage with a local agent or broker as well to really represent your products and be going out there. Regardless of who you partner with, you also want to make sure you have a really strong kind of agreement and always have an out. Know how or when to dissolve the partnership and make sure that's all clear as well and to your benefit.
Chelsea, would you like to add to that?
I think it was pretty well covered already.
Okay, that's great. That's great. We are doing great with time, but I do want to take some time for some of the questions that we have received from our participants. I would like to address that. So a participant has asked us, I want to export BC wine to China. What support is available for me? So, Emily, would you like to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the point of contact in Canada, in BC, for the Trade Commissioner Service for food and beverage products and natural health products is Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Mm-hmm. They have a regional office based in Burnaby, mm-hmm. and they have officers covering all different subsectors of agriculture as well. So they have someone there covering alcoholic beverages. So I would connect with them to talk about your plans. And I know they also have a number of market reports and things like that on exporting wine to China. There are different trade shows as well. BC government has a number of resources as well, both Jobs, Trade and Technology, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture. Lots of resources available, but that would be my recommended start.
That's great. Chelsea, would you like to add anything to it?
Sure. Just wanted to mention other resources that Emily mentioned, like the BC government. We do have 4 offices in China, one in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong. So they can also provide advice if those are the markets in China you're interested in sending the wine to.
Oh, that's great. Kenny, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, again, EDC also has lots of support there. And one of the big risks exporting abroad, whether it's to China or more closer to home, the United States, is the worry of what happens if I don't get paid. And so EDC as insurance, we've availed of it for over 40 years. But essentially, if you take a nominal, very small percentage of the sale as insurance and pay that, if the client doesn't pay you, you can get up to like 90% paid back to you of that receivable or unpaid receivable by EDC. So it's, over the years, we haven't had to avail of it too much, but when you do, you're sure glad that you have it, so you're not out of pocket the money. So that helps mitigate some risk and also, ensure that you've done all the other parts right, but if there's risk of being paid, that takes away one of the biggest, at least I can say from a CEO perspective, one of the biggest concerns is making sure that we actually get paid after we do all that work.
Oh, that's great. I hope this participant has got lots of resources in response to her question.
She wants us to try out her wine and
so one last closing remark as we wrap up today from our panelists. Kerry, what would you say, like one last closing remark, what would you advise to our participants today regarding exporting?
I say just get out there and do it. I mean, if you want to just tip your toe in the water or put your toe in the water, the U.S. is right to the south of us. We're substantially similar. There's opportunity for you to go there with the EDC insurance. You can take away really almost any risk of getting paid. You can sell in U.S. dollars. We sell in U.S. dollars everywhere outside of Canada. We only sell in Canadian dollars in Canada. And you can see, at least currently with the exchange rate, why that would be advantageous for income and net profit. So I just say just get out there and avail of some of these programs. It's a very little amount of time to just get involved with, whether it's the Trade Navigator or the TAP through World Trade Center, or ICE, which is the e-commerce essentials, or engaging with EDC as to way they can help you. So just get out there and do it. I don't think anybody I've ever spoken to that's gone abroad has ever been sorry that they did.
That's great suggestion. Just get out and do it. You're right. Chelsea, one last closing remark.
Sure, thank you. I think closing remark from mine would be that, free trade agreements, they are a competitive advantage, but they are tools. So if you don't use it, you need to use it to benefit from it. That's what I'm trying to say. So we are here to help. If you have questions about the agreements, how they work, which countries we have them with, and how you can use them, don't hesitate to send me an email, give me a call, and get in touch. Like, we are here to help, and we do want to make sure that, as many BC businesses as possible are making the most of these agreements and taking advantage of them.
Thank you so much. Emily?
Yeah, I would just add on to those comments. That's great advice. And I know we've mentioned a number of different resources and programs around, and I would just encourage people not to get too concerned about remembering which organization does what. We all work very closely together, and happy to point you in certain directions. So don't try and go it alone. Reach out, and we will, I'm sure, have different resources and advice and programs like Can Export to help you along the way.
Thank you so much. And it's great to know that there are all these support programs available for women exporters there that can really help them in international trade. All right, so we have come almost to the end of our session. I want to thank all participants again for joining us. Our next forum is on mediation on June 20, Raising Capital 101 on July 17, and we have a series of free legal webinars in summer this year. You can sign up for these webinars online on our website. As I mentioned, remember to sign up for the newsletter on our website, womensenterprise.ca, for the announcement of upcoming workshops, webinars, or any opportunities. To our participants, you will be receiving a follow-up email from us, and it would be greatly appreciated if you could give us some feedback so we can improve this service for future sessions. On behalf of Women's Enterprise Center, I would like to thank our amazing panelists, Carrie, Emily, and Chelsea, who volunteered their time by offering and sharing their invaluable knowledge and experience. I know participants will benefit in their business as a result of hearing your experience. I know I learned a lot today, so thank you so much. We appreciate your commitment and dedication to the success of women entrepreneurs throughout the province. So thank you so much, Carrie, Emily, and Chelsea. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and helping our participants. And I also want to thank our participants for joining us today. As I mentioned, the recording will be available on our website. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.